One other angle to touch on before we take our first break. Brian Flores has expanded his claims against the Miami Dolphins. Now, in the first edition of the complaint that he filed, he makes reference to his allegation that owner Stephen Ross was unhappy that the team was winning games in 2019. There was a full season tank that Ross wanted to engage in, and at some point Ross offered Brian Flores $100,000 for each game that he lost that year, and Flores objected to that, and that's one of the reasons why he fell out of favor with Stephen Ross. Now in the amended complaint, there is a specific claim that Flores was a whistleblower, and he has protections as a whistleblower because he raised internally his concerns about the pressure that was being placed upon him to lose, because that amounts to a violation of the Sports Betting Act, which basically says you can't try to get people to deliberately lose sporting events. It's the effort to ensure that there's integrity of the wagering that is done on boxing matches, football games, baseball games, basketball, any type of sporting event. So, as part of his effort to claim that his firing occurred in retaliation for his stance as a whistleblower, he points out that he prepared a memo in December of 2019 and gave it to people within the organization like GM Chris Greer and team president Tom Garfinkel, documenting his concerns about being pressured by Stephen Ross to lose games. That's significant. And the Dolphins have privately acknowledged that, and this is according to someone who's involved in the investigation that's been happening, that they did send that memo to the league several weeks ago. And I think that the Dolphins may not be interpreting this the way that they could or should. Look, and I don't want to get too deep into this, but it's one thing for Brian Flores to claim that he had a conversation or heard directly from Stephen Ross that he wanted him to lose games and he offered him $100,000. It's another thing for Brian Flores to document it, because it's the documentation of it, even if it's not sent to Stephen Ross. Documenting it, sending it to members of management, that puts you on record. You are on record at that point as having an issue with this. You have blown the whistle internally. That's what gives you the protection under the law against retaliation. And his argument is, and this is where the average person gets confused, are you saying you got fired because of your race? Did you get fired because of retaliation because you were a whistleblower? Well, you're allowed to go in and say it's both, it's either, I don't know. All I know is I shouldn't have been fired. It's for a jury to decide whether it was some of both, one or the other, both, completely, or neither. But you're allowed to have alternative theories that you argue in an effort to get to the bottom of something that you think was ultimately wrong. Brian Flores believes he shouldn't have been fired by the Miami Dolphins, and there was something that they had against him that they shouldn't have had against him when they decided to fire him.
All right, Mike, I have a question here. So the Dolphins say that they sent this to the NFL weeks ago. Wouldn't they have been required by the NFL to give it to the NFL at the time it was filed in December of 2019? Wouldn't they have been required to do that and the NFL then start an investigation?
Hey, that is one of the major batches of questions I have about this. What did the Dolphins do when they got it? Did they investigate themselves? Did they tell the league? Did the league investigate? Did anyone come to Brian Flores and talk to him about it? Was it just like, that family secret nobody ever discusses? What are you talking about? What? Flick who? I mean, so I don't know, and nobody knows other than Brian Flores and some key employees with the Miami Dolphins what happened after he sent that memo. But that memo was a pretty big deal. And, he still was employed as head coach of the team for 2 more years. So I don't know what it was that was the final straw, what it was that made Stephen Ross decide to engage in this action. And that's part of what the litigation process will get to the bottom of. You put Stephen Ross under oath. You require him to answer repeated questions, possibly aggressive, about why he did what he did and how he came to his conclusion. It's not just Stephen Ross, it's others in the organization who are in a position to know what happened. And you weave together. This is how it works. I did this for 18 years. Because nobody's ever going to get on the witness stand and say, I did it. Nobody's ever going to say, we fired this guy because he pissed us off, because not only did he refuse to lose games, he created this memo that just was a big, ugly mess for us, and that's just not the way we do things, and we don't look kindly on guys who don't get it, who don't know how to play ball, and, they're never going to admit to that. And if there is some sort of baked-in racial bias when it comes to white owners preferring white coaches, that's not going to come out either. You're not going to admit it. You show by basically dismantling one excuse at a time, one reason at a time, the stated justification for firing someone, that it's bullcrap. And when you show that every reason that has been provided is not truthful, is not plausible, does not make sense, that's when you're left to argue to a jury, and hopefully the jury accepts your argument, that there must have been some improper motive that caused this outcome, a motive they're never going to admit to. But we've shown that the justifications they are trying to sell to you are not believable, which means they're hiding something else, maybe something they won't even admit to themselves, Charean.
Boy, this just really looks bad for Stephen Ross, Mike. And I'm going to be surprised. Of course, I was surprised am surprised that Dan Snyder still has a job. I'm going to be more surprised if Stephen Ross still has his team when all this ends. Both of those guys should be out of the NFL. And I don't know what else you say to that. Both those guys should be removed from the NFL.
Here's the problem as it relates to Ross.
I know where you're going.
But because the league's motivation at this point is to circle the wagons to fight back against Brian Flores. The league is not going to find that Stephen Ross deliberately tried to lose games, offered and wasn't joking $100,000 per loss, because I've kind of heard, I haven't gotten this with any clarity, but I've gotten the sense that his defense will be, I was joking. Now, without the Brian Flores lawsuit, I think Roger Goodell possibly says to Stephen Ross, baloney. With the Brian Flores lawsuit, Roger Goodell says to everyone, Stephen Ross was joking, because it's in the NFL's interest to circle the wagons and defend Stephen Ross. And I saw that all the time. There would be a manager who was the problem, who was the person who committed the violations of the law that resulted in someone being fired from their job in violation of whatever it is, Human Rights Act, whatever it may be. The company has no choice but to rally around that person until the lawsuit's over. Then when the lawsuit's over, we'll deal with this person. But while the lawsuit's pending, we can't throw this guy under the bus. We can't say that this guy did what he's accused of doing, because we got this bigger fish to fry. That's what will save Stephen Ross, at least until the Brian Flores lawsuit is over.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.